Hello and welcome to a special episode of Slash Pick. This is the show where we talk about slasher movies, and this episode we are actually talking about Black Christmas. We'd originally filmed this early on in the show's run and on my other channel, Only Stupid Answers, but we decided to hold on to it for a more opportune moment. And what is more timely for a slasher Christmas movie than Christmas Day itself? I want to wish everybody at home a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, whatever you're celebrating. I hope you're having a happy, blessed, and safe time. But if you're tired of all that Christmas joy and all that holiday spirit, you want something a little bit more spooky, buckle in for Adam and Mai's discussion of Black Christmas. I hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Slash Pick. This is the show where we talk about slasher movies, horror movies, and everything spooky. I'm your host, DJ Wooldridge. With me always is Adam. Hey, man.
What's up, everybody? Let's get spooky.
So far on this show, we've done, we're going through slasher movies, like I said, and we started with kind of the prototype for American slasher movies, which was Psycho, and then we moved on to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there was a pretty big time jump between those. I think, what was it, 60 to 74 or 64 to 74?
Yeah, it was like 14 years.
14 years. But now we're going to camp out in 1974 because Adam made the recommendation of checking out Black Christmas, and I'm glad he did because this movie was not on my radar. I was aware of the couple of remakes. I know neither one of them are incredibly well regarded. And what's interesting about this movie that we're talking about today is it's a Canadian horror movie. And I'm going to be honest with you, Adam, I don't think I've ever felt more, older. You watching Psycho from 1960, I get all the things. Stuff happened in this movie. I'm like, is this an alternate universe? And I was like, I guess Canada in 74 is different enough. Like, there's a whole joke that I don't understand how it works. Like, I don't like somebody asks for a phone number and she like gives a word. I'm like, whoa, who would fall for that?
Oh my God. Yeah. And it's funny. Like when I suggested the movie, I had forgot that it was a Canadian film.
Yeah.
And I started to go through my Rolodex of movies, and I'm like, I honestly don't even know what other slasher horror films that I'm aware of that are Canadian.
Yeah.
Like uber Canadian. I have literally no clue. I truly don't know.
I should have.
So it was fun.
Yeah, I should have brought this up. I wanted to bring up. So sorry, gang. My computer is being kind of slow today, so we'll see if I'm able to get this up. But this movie originally aired in Canada on October 11th, 1974. If you recall, that's the same date as Texas Chainsaw in America. This movie dropped stateside on December 20th, 1974. Seasonal favorite, good seasonal time. The synopsis is, during their Christmas break, a group of sorority girls are stalked by a stranger. Classic. Rotten Tomatoes has this at 68% with an audience score of 76%, and the critics' consensus is the rare slasher with enough intelligence to wind up the tension between bloody outbursts. Black Christmas offers fiendishly enjoyable holiday viewing for genre fans. And this movie was directed by Bob Clark, and I wanted to bring up Bob Clark because watching this movie, I'm like, whoever directed this did a good job. You know what I mean? I was, sometimes you're watching, you're like, you're good. Why don't I recognize your name? So I looked up Bob Clark, and he's done some other movies you might have heard of and some that you might not have heard of. But I wanted to bring him up because he did Black Christmas. He did Porky's and Porky's 2 the next day. He did A Christmas Story. And he did Rhinestone, and he did the Baby Geniuses movies. But here's one of his earlier. Here's one of his earlier films that I just wanted to mention. She-Man, a 1967 American film. It is about a former soldier who becomes a cross-dresser. That's all I know. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's aged great.
I've never seen it, so I can't vouch for it either way.
Yeah.
I was completely unaware that it was the same Bob Clark who did A Christmas Story, though. So
yeah,
that's pretty great to have like two films in your filmography that are very Christmas centric. That couldn't be any different.
Yeah, it could be more different. Just before we leave She-Man, an Encyclopedia of Gay and Lesbian Films described She-Man as hilariously bad in all respects. So, so 2 Christmas movies. And what's interesting about this one is that it kind of doesn't matter that it's set on Christmas.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really.
And it's one of those, at first I was like, I kind of wish my normal slasher brain, I was like, why doesn't the killer dress like Santa or something?
Right.
And then I was kind of glad they didn't. And it made me wish, I'll get into some of the behind the scenes. It started off with a different name, but it's like I kind of wish they went the Die Hard route where it just happens to be set on Christmas. We're not theming this Christmas. It's not like it's not like Die Hard is named Christmas Attack or something. It's Die Hard and it's set on Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that was part of the, I guess, interesting thing about revisiting or seeing this movie was I was expecting, like you're saying, to be a lot more Christmas centric. You know, like using insane decorations to kill people. You know, all kinds of weird things like that. And it really wasn't. And I started thinking to myself, is there a movie that set that in motion?
Yeah.
And I wonder if once we get to it, if Halloween is that movie that took the concept and the idea of a slasher pick set on a holiday that leans into it.
Yeah.
And if everything after that, and maybe I'm wrong, there might have been something before that, because I really was expecting this to be something that utilizes the elements of Christmas to basically like terrorize everyone. And it did not. It just happened, like you're saying, just happened to be set on Christmas or during the Christmas time.
Yeah.
And I feel like, at least for me, in my experience of what I've seen, Halloween feels like the first film that uses the holiday to lean into the holiday and use that against people.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if that's the first movie that from that point on, everyone's like, oh, let's do another Christmas horror movie where we use the elements of Christmas against everybody. You know, Thanksgiving, all of that kind of stuff.
All that stuff. Well, it's also, I think what you're touching on too is also we're in a stage in slasher movies, at least American slasher movies, where it's almost pre-gimmick. You know what I mean? Where it's the fact that there's a person running around murdering people is enough. They don't need a special costume or a special weapon or, and as point of reference, not to jump too far ahead, but you know, it's almost like every year now, my wife and I have gone through different series. So a couple years ago it was Chucky. Last year was Halloween. This year we've started going through the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. And I was going to pause on it because I was like, well, we're going to cover it on the show. And it's actually going to be a minute before we get to Elm Street. So I'm like, fuck it. Who gives a shit? And what's funny is I don't think I've ever really seen the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie before. And like out of the gate, because that's deep, you know, like I said, it's going to be a minute till we get there. So that we're kind of deep into the slasher trend at that point. Out of the gate, they got like, they know Freddy needs a gimmick. He needs a special weapon. He needs a distinct silhouette. We're not at that point with Black Christmas. And which is probably why it's not a guy dressed like Santa. And I'm sure there is a slasher movie where the killer's dressed like Santa. But this isn't that. It really, the Christmas aspect of it is almost ancillary.
Yeah. And so I just quickly looked it up, and there is a movie called Silent Night, Bloody Night. Okay. That is a slasher film. That seems like it may be set around the Christmas time. Yeah. But I've never seen it, so that may be the one that's kind of like, oh, we really use Christmas to do all these like murders and stuff. Or it does not. Or it's just like this film where it's set around Christmas. Yeah. But it doesn't really like lean into that. Well, so I don't know.
Speaking of the time period, so we're last time was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which also 1974. So we're still in 1974. I'm not going to revisit. We got this segment, Terror Time Machine, where we're looking at the time period. I don't need to revisit all the stuff that's going on. Overview, Vietnam, Ted Bundy, Nixon. Those are the big headlines. But what we didn't focus on last time that I thought we could focus on this time is the other movies coming out in 1974 to give you a sense of what else is hitting theaters at the time that Black Christmas is. So here are the top 10 grossing movies of 1974. We have The Towering Inferno, Blazing Saddles, which that was crazy to me. That was number 2. A Comedy was the number 2.
Yeah.
I miss it.
Not anymore.
I miss it, Adam. I miss it.
I know.
Young Frankenstein. Oh my God. 2 comedies back to back in the top 3. Earthquake, The Trial of Billy Jack, The Godfather Part 2. That's number 6. That's wild.
Godfather Part 2 is number 6?
Number 6. Wow. Airport 1975. So for those keeping track, that's 3 disaster movies that are in the top 10. Yeah, those are the Marvel movies of their era. Yeah. Number 9 is Death Wish. And number 10 is The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams. Here are some other movies that came out in 1974. Chinatown. Boo, Roman Polanski. Yep. Chinatown's a good movie, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a good movie. Zardoz came out. So for those that aren't familiar, that's the Sean Connery wearing the man thong. It also has an image. Adam, have you ever seen Zardoz?
No, I have not.
There's one image that, so for those that don't know, it's a post-apocalyptic world where like there's a barbarian group of people that Sean Connery's a part of, and then like the 1%ers that live in like bougie capital cities, and it's a cultural overthrow kind of a thing. But there's one image in it that the opening 10 minutes is one of the craziest things I've seen in movies, and makes me wish somebody would like revisit it, because Sean Connery's people are this like nomadic tribe of people that are always warring with each other. And the reason they're always warring with each other is there's this flying stone head that shows up and basically out of his mouth spits out guns at them and is like, "Oh, fight for me."
Oh my God.
And for whatever reason, I don't remember, it's been a while since I've seen it, Sean Connery's character sneaks into the stone head, realizes it's operated by a person, kills that person, and rides the stone head back to the people that are keeping these people fighting so they stay out of their business. And it's like, in the first 10 minutes of this movie, we are introduced to Man-Thong Sean Connery, stone God that spits guns at people, and then Sean Connery kills God. That's the first 10 minutes of this movie.
What?
That's insane.
Oh my God.
So Zardoz. Also in 1974, we got Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. We got The Sugarland Express, which is Steven Spielberg's first theatrical movie.
Yeah. Wow.
Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Phantom of the Paradise, a wild Brian De Palma film. And The Man with the Golden Gun. Also,
nice.
In March 28th, keeping our milestones here for our future slasher icons, John Carpenter's directorial debut, Dark Star, had a limited LA release at the Los Angeles International Film Exposition.
Wow.
In 1974. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I'm looking up and I'm just seeing like how many celebrities were also born in 1974. Holy God!
That's a good. Who do we have?
Jermaine Clement.
Wow.
Kevin Durand. Who else is in here? Ed Helms, Christian Bale, Olivia Colman, Seth Green, Elizabeth Banks. Good God. Who else is in here? Jerry O'Connell is in here. Kevin Connolly, Matt Lucas, Ava Mendes, Jenna Fisher.
Wow. That's wild.
It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Wow. Penelope Cruz. Jesus Lord. Joseph Kaczynski. Breckin Meyer.
So many people.
Wow.
So
Sean Gunn.
Before we get into the movie proper, a little bit behind the scenes stuff. I'm trying to think, do I want to do, because some of the behind the scenes stuff is spoilers. We're assuming you've watched the movie before you watch this episode.
I would hope so.
At least with this one.
I hope you did your homework, damn it.
Yeah, by the way, this is a good one. So like, this is one, if you're like, I don't know, I recommend it. We're in a really sweet spot. Things are going to get a little dicier, especially as we get into the hip deep in the 80s. But right now, we're in the sweet spot for slashers.
Yeah.
So Black Christmas was initially developed by Canadian screenwriter Roy Moore, who wrote the screenplay under the title Stop Me. Inspirations for the film came from the urban legend known as The Babysitter and The Man Upstairs, which had become widespread during the 70s. Moore claimed to have also been inspired by a series of murders that occurred during the holiday season in the Westmount area of Montreal. As noted in an article for The Telegraph, the murders, which occurred in 1943, were perpetrated by a 14-year-old boy who bludgeoned several of his family members to death. Film producers Harvey Sherman and Richard Schouten had Timothy Bond rewrite the script to give it a university setting. Director and producer Bob Clark, who had felt the original script was too much of a straightforward slasher film, made several alterations to the dialogue. Clark felt that college and high school students had not been depicted with any sense of reality in American films, and then he intended to capture the astuteness of young adults. Quote, college students, even in 1974, are astute people. They're not fools. It's not all bikinis, beach blankets, and bingo. So Olivia Hussey, if you, like me, were watching this like, that face seems familiar, but I can't.
I remember 10th grade English.
Yeah, well, yeah. So she had previously garnered international fame for the role of Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. And she signed on to appear in the film after being told by a psychic that she would, quote, make a film in Canada that would earn a great deal of money.
Yep.
70s, everybody. Yep.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. Gilda Radner was offered the role of Phyllis. She accepted the part, but dropped out 1 month before filming began, owing to Saturday Night Live commitments, and was replaced by the fellow Second City comedy troupe performer Andrea Martin. Saxxon, who in my notes I call Cop Daddy because of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. It was had previously appeared in what is widely regarded the first giallo film, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, in 1963. So there was some fun stuff. Like, they were going to cast Saxxon, and somebody else took the part, but then that person dropped out, so they went back to Saxxon. And I think he's great here. Margot Kidder remembered, future Lois Lane Margot Kidder, remembered shooting the film as being, quote, fun. I really bonded with Andrea Martin filming in Toronto and Ontario. Olivia Hussey was a bit of an odd one. She was obsessed with the idea of falling in love with Paul McCartney through her psychic.
Oh my God.
We were a little hard on her for things like that. Yeah. The audio, this is key. I wanted to find out about this because a big part of this movie is these phone calls that are wild. They're and I like,
they're insane. I was like watching them going, oh, this is where it went. Okay.
Yeah. Well, because in watching, I was kind of like, am I supposed to be understanding what this person's saying? And then by the end of the movie, it's like, no, I don't think so. I actually don't think I am. I think you're supposed to pick up on a few things here and there. Spoiler, and it doesn't matter. It ultimately doesn't matter.
No, not at all. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter at all. I was almost waiting for a revelation, and I'm like, no, this is just obscene phone calls. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Which I will get into it, but I like that decision. I like that there's not a, by the way, here's what's going on explanation. The audio on the disturbing phone calls was performed by multiple actors, including Mancuso, the actor who was hired to play the killer. And director Bob Clark. Mancuso stated in an interview that he stood on his head during the recording sessions to compress his thorax to make his voice sound more demented. During preparation in 1975 for the film's American release, Warner Brothers Studios executive asked Clark to change the concluding scene. I'm going to hold off on this. Put a pin in that. I'm going to change.
Okay.
We'll go through
I'm
it
curious
bit by
to
bit.
what that is.
Yeah, because I don't want to necessarily spoil the show where we spoil it.
Yeah.
The film was released on December 20th and only earned, it didn't earn a lot of money due to competing with Godfather and Man with the Golden Gun. The American release retitled it Silent Night, Evil Night due to fears of the original title would mislead audiences into believing the film was a blaxploitation movie.
Interesting.
They retracted the title after the initial release, restoring it to Black Christmas for subsequent screenings. The film, and this goes back to some of the history stuff we were talking about last time. The film, under the title Stranger in the House, was set to make its network television premiere on Saturday night, January 20th, 1978, on NBC's Saturday Night at the Movies. 2 weeks prior to its premiere, the Chi Omega sorority house, Chi Omega, whatever, house on the campus of Florida State University in Tallahassee was the scene of a double murder in which two Chi Omega sisters, asleep in their beds, were bludgeoned to death. The killer then went to a nearby room in the sorority house and violently attacked two more sleeping students who survived. The killer was later identified as Ted Bundy, who was executed for this and other homicides on January 24th, 1989. Think about that. Over 10 years later.
God.
Yeah. So
that's insane.
This guy's going around terrorizing people for over a decade before any sort of, and you can see how obviously this event, the specific event we're referencing is in relation to why it matters here is it's in relation to the TV release of this movie. So this movie's already been made, but you can kind of see how that idea, there was at least one guy going around murdering people and we had no clue who he was until like 10 years later. And that's when he was executed. It probably wasn't a full 10 years, but it was a chunk of time. And so you can see how stuff like that might inform the ending of this movie, where there is no real closure.
Right. Yeah, and that's insane. I did not know that. And yeah, it's such a different. Well, I do wonder, like, would we do something like this today? I don't think we would. Only because I feel like there's just so much more out there, and there's so much more news that's distracting us at any given minute. Yeah. That in 1974, that was like the headline of the week, the month, that entire like time of the year. Yeah. So yeah, like that's insane, and especially just thematically how similar that is. Like,
Yeah.
of course they would say, no, man, we this is too fresh.
So Bundy was arrested
can't.
Bundy was arrested in 75,
Mm-hmm.
but he escaped, and they had to recapture him in like 78. But there was a good chunk of time where, because I looked it up when I saw, he keeps popping up. So I was like, I need to brush up on my Ted Bundy lore. And it's funny looking at those crimes where I'm like, what's interesting about these crimes compared to slasher movies? This isn't fun. This isn't fun or cute or exciting. This is just fucked up.
Morbid.
Yeah, this is just fucked up. Black Christmas eventually gained a cult following, and it is notable for being one of the early slasher films that went on to inspire other slasher films, the biggest one of all being John Carpenter's Halloween. Speaking with icons of fright many years ago, the late Bob Clark relayed the tale. This is via Bloody Discussing, by the way, where I got this, and they got it from Icons of Fright. Nice. Quote, I never intended to do a sequel to Black Christmas. I did a film about 3 years later, started a film with John Carpenter. It was his first film for Warner Brothers. He asked me if I was ever going to do a sequel, and I said no. I was through with horror. I didn't come into the business to just do horror. He said, well, what would you do if you did do a sequel? I said it would be the next year, and the guy would eventually been caught, escape from a mental institution, go back, a little shades of Ted Bundy there, mental institution, go back to the house, and they would start all over again, and I would call it Halloween. Clark went on to say, the truth is John didn't copy Black Christmas. He wrote a script, directed the script, did the casting. Halloween is his horror movie, and besides, the script came to him already titled anyway. He liked Black Christmas and may have been influenced by it, but in no way did John Carpenter copy the idea. 15 other people at the time had thought to do a movie called Halloween, but the script came to John with that title on it. And I kind of love that connection.
I do too. Yeah. I didn't know that. I'm learning that for the first time. That's kind of brilliant. And I definitely see, like, the minute the movie opens, like, I can already see the shades and the influence, how Carpenter was influenced for Halloween with certain things. Yeah. And it was actually, I think that was like one of the most enjoyable things about watching this film is watching that and seeing, Hector likes to call it the Matrix Code. And now I'm like, I see the Matrix Code of this movie, and then I see the Matrix Code of Halloween, and I can see how easily those two things are connected. And it really, like, if anything, as a Halloween fan, it kind of just sucked me in a little bit more to, like, pay attention to see, like, oh, is there more similarities in this movie? Now I'm, like, really invested and interested in this. Yeah. Because I was telling you before we started recording, I thought I had seen this film, and I think I've seen snippets of the movie, but I don't think I've ever sat down to fully watch it start to finish all the way through. So this was like a rediscovery of this movie for me, which I thought was really fun.
Absolutely. And I kind of want... I don't know that I can square, but I kind of want in my headcanon this to be a Halloween prequel.
In the universe?
Yeah, because in some ways, I don't really feel this way, but in some ways, for example, in my headcanon, the Batman, the Robert Pattinson, the Batman, is the third Dark Knight movie. Because he's already been active for a while. Spoilers for the Batman. The Joker shows up in it and he's been incarcerated. There's things that don't work in that, Commissioner Gordon's no longer commissioner. He's busted back to being a cop. But there's enough. It's like, other than that, and obviously different actors, they don't necessarily, other than those little things, they don't cancel each other out. In my mind, I could just make this the third Dark Knight movie and kind of be okay. I kind of be okay. But anyway, so it doesn't quite work with Halloween, obviously, because Halloween opens with Michael Myers' origin story. But maybe a Black Christmas is tucked away in between those two scenes.
Well, but or it could be as simple as like, oh, Michael Myers watched Black Christmas on Halloween, and then he was like, oh, I have an idea. I'm gonna go murder everyone. So let's get into the movie itself. We open with some POV from the killer as they approach what I have in my notes, the Christmas house. We learn it's the sorority house. And what I wanted to take a moment to point this out, because is this the first time on this show of the movies we've covered that we've utilized the killer's POV? Yeah, I think so, because with Psycho, I don't think we ever see, we don't specifically see POV, and then in Texas Chainsaw, I also do not think we see any POV specifically of the killer at all. So yeah, I do think that this is the first time that we see that, and in the opening especially, because I know that Halloween is famously known for using the first glide cam or steady cam to do the opening sequence, because it is as smooth as butter. And in this one, it's very handheld, and they kind of are ballsy with it, where they even have the killer like climbing up the side of the house, and the camera goes as far as it can go. And the whole time I'm thinking, how did they do this? And I looked to see what it was shot on, to see if it was 16 millimeter versus 35, because 16 mil cameras are much smaller. So I could believe that they could figure out a way to strap it to them, but it's all shot on 35, and those things are pretty enormous for 74. So I'm like, damn, like, did they just have someone behind them and they just went up as far as they could? It was just fascinating to watch that, to try to like break it down in my brain to see like, how did they do that in 74 if glide cams and steady cams and things like that didn't exist, and it's just purely handheld.
Yeah, and I want to say I should have pulled this in my notes. I want to say they strapped it to for that stuff. They strapped it to the cameraman.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and it's just, and it is interesting. I watched, for point of reference, I just watched Labyrinth for the first time. And it's funny going back, watching some of that stuff where it's like, wow, I actually don't know how they did that. Like if it was today, I'd be like computers. But now it's like, I actually don't know what you did to accomplish that shot, you know? Which is the scenes involving the scenes of the film involving POV shot of Billy scaling the house was accomplished through a use of rig designed by camera operator Burt Dunk. Great name. What a winner of a name. Which was attached to Dunk's head as he climbed the side of the house. And to your point, that's not a light camera. Griffin's death scene, which was shot with a handheld camera in a real closet, was accomplished on a couple of takes. Oh, and according to Griffin, she was actually surprised when he lunged out because she didn't know when that was going to happen.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that's it. You're right, because now if you saw that exact same shot in a movie, you'd be like, GoPro.
Oh, yeah. Or even not a GoPro. Like now digital cameras are so small.
Yeah.
You can mount an FX3 to somebody, to their head or their chest.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near the weight of, especially with like how much tech we have now with like lensing and all that stuff. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how heavy having a 35 millimeter camera on your head is.
Yeah. So cutting into the house, we are introduced first to Margot Kidder, like I mentioned, 4 years prior to being Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane. She gets a call from her mom. It's so funny because I'm picking up on stuff because at this point, I don't know what matters and what doesn't matter. So she gets a call from her mom. What I think we're introducing here is because she invites the girls skiing or whatever, and there's some tension. And in hindsight, it's like, oh, we're introducing the fact that Barb, Margot Kidder's character, is a drunk. That is her deal, and she's kind of a pain. She's kind of a pain to be around. Sassy lady. Yeah, she's kind of a pain to be around sometimes. The house gets a call from somebody they call the Moaner. And I have in my notes, the shit the Moaner says is pretty dark for a movie in the 70s. Oh my God.
I was like, did you just say what I think? Did you just say this? Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. Do I need to rewind and put subtitles on, or did I really just hear what you said?
Yeah, I should have watched it with subtitles just to see if I could catch more of the Moaner, what the Moaner said. Yeah, and it's funny too. I think what might be here with me is I was like, could you do this in the 70s? And I think my issue is, and I don't think I'm alone in this, you tend to think of openness, being more progressive with the stuff you talk about being a linear line, and it is not. And we are in a time period that is like they were afraid to put a kiss in the new Twisters movie. That's the time we live in now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, but I assume in my brain the 70s are before now, so therefore more conservative than now. And clearly that between this and Texas Chainsaw, that's just not true. That's just not the case.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with horror, I think the mindset was, and I don't know if it's like this necessarily now, and not even because of like how society has changed, but I think also how audiences have changed and how they consume media. I think back then, I feel like they were just like, you know what, rip the fucking Band-Aid off. We don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, a phone call, like you can just, even back then, you can just ADR it.
Yeah.
And you could replace it. If they're like, oh, well, we're going to give this an NC-17 rating because of the verbiage you're using, that's so easy to fix.
Yeah.
That's so easy to change.
Yeah, so and part of the conversation, they talk about after this happens, Barb's very flippant about it, but the girls remind her a girl recently just got raped. And Barb says something that I didn't even, like, what are you even trying to communicate? She's like, a townie. You can't rape a townie. Is that
Yeah, and I was like,
are townies
I don't know
loose?
what that
What's
means.
the insult here? I don't even know what you're trying to communicate.
yeah, that was my first reaction was, I don't understand what this means.
Yeah.
Is this an inside Canadian thing?
Yeah.
Or is this woman just truly unhinged?
Yeah. Which offends Claire, who goes upstairs when she was earlier when Barb was inviting people to go skiing. Claire was not having it. Well, we will come to learn as Claire comes from a little bit of a conservative background, so she's a little less. A little bit of Barb goes a long way for Claire.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Claire goes up to her room, and in her room, Claire is attacked by the moaner, and we see the moaner take her upstairs. This creates some confusion for me later because we do a lot of shots of Claire's body. I'm like, where the fuck is Claire? Because I thought it was back in her room, but then they're going in her room. I'm like, where is Claire?
Yeah, and it's like nobody has gone into her room to check on her. What is wrong with all these idiots?
I have in my notes, is Jess British? Our main girl, is Jess British? And the answer is yes. Jess is a British Argentinian actress. I just told you from Romeo and Juliet. But it was a weird, like, again, as Adam pointed out, the Canadianisms. I'm like, where am I in time and space?
Where are we? What's happening? Also, I just want to point out that Olivia Hussey answering the phone and screaming, hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Who is this? I was like, oh my God. Okay. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So Claire is dead and up in the attic. We cut to this shot
God, these
a lot.
photos.
Yeah. She's dead up in the attic. Meanwhile, the den mother comes back. What's her name? Her name is Mrs. Mack, I believe. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Who also, by the way, is a little bit of a lush.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Everyone in this movie is just like having the time of their life, I guess.
Yeah. So Claire's dad comes looking for her. This is where you find out he's a real pill. Something I do like about this movie is neither the dad, Claire's dad, or Miss Mack are completely right and wrong.
Right.
Claire's dad is a little too uptight, but also Miss Mack and Barb genuinely have a problem. They have a problem.
Like a little too loosey-goosey in my opinion for being like someone who's I don't know, what do they call them? Like a sorority mom?
Yeah, this was the other thing. I think for me, it was a combination of different era, 1974, different country, Canada, and sorority house. I'm like, why is this? Oh, is this what a den mother is? She just drinks with the girls? Is that what this is?
That's great.
Yeah, a little bit of a learning curve with the reality of Black Christmas.
Right?
So... yeah, I have my notes. I assume this older lady is the den mother or something, and she has a drinking problem with bottles stashed everywhere.
My God, in the toilet,
and the
you guys stashed
commode,
in the toilet, in the closet. I'm like, lady, you got a real problem.
And I know the commode is not where the pee and the poo like, but it was a little like, a little bit that toilet water's getting into your drink, lady.
Yeah. I don't know about that bottle.
I don't know about that one. She's got like hidden books and stuff like that. It's a problem. Okay, so. Claire's dad's here, just tells her boyfriend, we cut to, oh my God, Peter, fucking Peter. We meet Jess's boyfriend, and she tells him that she is pregnant, and she is going to abort the baby. And I don't know about you, Adam, because we're in 74. I'm like, where's this going to go? Where are we going to do with this?
I was like, oh my God, this is the subplot.
Yeah.
Oh Christ, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And it sucks too because like Keir Dullea, who plays that character, I know him from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I love him in that movie. He's so good in that film. So to come into this film, first of all, that haircut. Ooh, brother.
Yep.
Second of all, he's kind of a dick. And he really makes it known in this first scene. And I'm like, oh God. I need to go watch 2001 to cleanse my palate.
Yeah. But to the movie's credit, it's clear they understand Peter's a dick. Like, because I was a little worried. Like, are we gonna like try and punish this girl because she wants to get an abortion? Movie's on Justice's side. And having met Peter, I'm like, that's the correct answer, young lady. Yes, you should not have his kid. Don't do that.
Yep. Don't set yourself up like that.
No, don't do that, Peter.
Not at all.
And I love the scene, and because I wonder if it would play how different it would play today. It might not be that different. There's a scene later where Peter has a whole crisis that we're gonna get into, but where she has to explain to Peter, it's like, no, Peter, you don't understand. It's not that. I specifically don't want your baby. is what you need to understand about this situation.
Yep. I don't want to marry you.
Yeah.
I don't want your baby.
Yeah, it's like what we're doing.
You're problematic, sir.
Yeah. We're setting up. There's a holiday party. One of their friends with one of the biggest afros I've seen on a movie is going to be their Santa Claus. And again, this is the thing. Like the second you meet Claire's dad, you're like, this guy, right? But then there's scenes like this where like the one guy that's playing Santa is cursing around the kids. Barb is actively giving alcohol to one of the kids. I'm like, he's not entirely. This dad's not entirely wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're a problematic bunch for sure.
Yeah. So Barb and Claire's dad go to the police. We meet Nash, who is one of the most incompetent cops on. I do like 70s slasher films because there's a little bit of a ACAB undercurrent. Which I think is part of the nature of the franchise, because you need your killer in the franchise, this genre, because you can't just have the cops come in and bust your guy immediately. And also, as we just pointed out, Ted Bundy murdered so many people before he was caught. Many.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, and I totally agree. And I it's part of the fun of these movies is like the cops are just as fucking dumb as the people who are being chased by the killer.
Yeah.
They're so useless.
Yeah.
Most of the time every once in a while there will be one cop. One cop who's like, I believe you. The one cop who's like, fine, I'll help you find the killer. In this movie it's John Saxxon's character.
Yeah.
In Halloween it's Brackett.
Yeah.
So like we will eventually get like one of those characters who's like, fine, okay. But most of the time, they're real useless and really dumb.
I can't wait to get to Halloween and talk about Loomis, who's one of my favorite movie maniacs. That guy.
Oh my God, DJ.
I think that guy is more dangerous than Michael.
Love him. No, absolutely. Are you kidding me? I don't know if we'll get to it, but if we ever get to Halloween 2.
Yeah, man.
I shot him 6 times.
Yeah,
I'm like,
dude.
You are one crazy son of a bitch.
I think it was NECA, because right in the middle of Monica and I watching the Halloween movies, NECA had this 2-pack of Michael and Loomis. And I was like, I need that Loomis, man. I need that fucking beautiful maniac.
I know. That is a gem of a character.
Yeah.
And only Donald Pleasance could have played it
For real. I do want them to do like a Halloween remake, because I was watching the Rob Zombie remakes, and it's like, I kind of wish the way they did this was Michael is a problem, but Loomis makes that problem way worse. Like Loomis is way more dangerous than even Michael is because of how unhinged he is. Like I'm so sorry. We're getting ahead of ourselves. I wanted one of the Halloween movies to be like, oh no, Loomis isn't that's just some guy. I don't know where he came from. He says he's Michael's therapist. I don't know who he is.
Oh my God.
Anyway, that's not the movie we're talking about. We're talking about the unofficial prequel, Black Christmas. And we've just met Nash, who is taking the number of the sorority house from Barb. And this is one of the things I was talking about. Barb smiles. She's like, all right, I'm going to give him a number. And she's like, it's fellatio. And then she says some numbers. And he has to have, not only does this phone number start with a word, which everybody takes as like, that's a thing. But also, he needs fellatio spelled for him. They do pay this off in that this is how we find out Nash is in particular stupid. But it was one of those like, what world am I in?
Yep. Yeah, the moment that happens, I'm thinking to myself, like, sir, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then they pay it off at the end, and you go, oh, you are that dumb.
You are, this is not just a weird Canadian thing. You in particular are dumb. Peter bungles his piano recital, and he will flip out and destroy what I hope is his piano, because pianos are not cheap.
That was like, it was such an abrupt cut to that, too.
Yeah.
And the whole time, in my head, I'm trying to like, is the movie maybe like trying too hard to convince me that this guy's the killer?
Mm-hmm.
Or
especially with
involved.
the piano score, because he's playing piano. A lot of the score is piano.
Yeah, and he's just like a dripping, sweaty mess, you know? And I'm like, this is really great. What is the movie trying to tell me about this character? I definitely know I shouldn't trust him, and I think he's an asshole. But wow, you really are, like, pun intended, hitting the nail over the head with this scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where we're introduced to Officer Dad, John Saxxon, in the future from Nightmare on Elm Street. And he will be the cop. Him and his just fucking perfect chin will be our main helpful cop. Barb flips out a little bit. She thinks everybody's blaming her for Claire's disappearance. I have in my notes, they tell Barb to go to bed, and Barb's about to eat it. Barb is going to bed drunk. She is not long for this world. The gang goes, so when we meet John Saxxon, we find out, and this is actually kind of important, a 13-year-old girl has gone missing. There will be a search party for this girl. I guess Jess and the gang later say they're also there to find Claire. And we'll find out, because you might pick up that there's a creepy phone call after every time somebody's died, except for the opening phone call. One can assume that's this little girl that's gone missing. Is that after that murder, that's where we got the phone call.
Yeah.
They go on the search party. Mrs. Mack is like, oh, by the way, I might be gone by the time you get back. R.I.P. Miss Mack. So Claire's boyfriend, but they're all on the thing. I have this note, like Claire's boyfriend, who's now part of the group trying to help find Claire, is like rubbing Jess's shoulders, which makes sense. It's cold. It's Canada. It's cold as shit. But I did think like, okay, so Jess and Claire's boyfriend are going to end up together because Peter ain't it.
Whether or not those things get paid off, you'll have to find out.
You'll have to find out. Well, and yeah, because there is a point. We'll get to a point where I'm like, wait, because like you, I was like, well, clearly Peter's a red herring. And there's a point in the movie I'm like, wait, is Peter it? No, the movie's doing something more interesting than that.
Yeah.
So, meanwhile, the young girl's corpse is found. We see a group of the search party. One of them has a glorious mustache, like one of the most unhinged mustaches I've ever seen. He's like around a trash fire. It's great. Barrel fire. It's not, I don't know that it's trash. Sorry. Anyway, Jess gets home. There's another obscene phone call. And then Peter's in the house waiting for her, which is weird enough. There's multiple times where they mention that the doors to the house aren't locked, which is like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. I'm like, I get it. Canadians are really friendly people.
Yeah.
Lock your fucking doors.
Lock your door. So Peter decides to, this is what we were talking about. He's like, I'm going to leave the conservatory. Let's go get married. And I actually really like this scene because Jess is kind of like, first she's like, well, I get that you've given up on the stuff you want to do. I haven't. And he's like, you could still do that stuff. She's like, oh, okay, so I'm going to have to go one level deeper. It's you, not me. That's the conversation we're having.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, Peter, you suck.
Yeah, it's like you really need to spell it out for him because it's not clicking for him, you know.
And something I like too is this is part of Peter being a red herring. However, I do like that there are some implications that Peter's dealing with some other stuff that we're not really privy to, but he's got other things he's processing.
Yeah.
So we follow up. This is where we follow up on the fellatio joke from earlier with the detective dad, John Saxxon, he needs to call the sorority house to follow up. Like basically he's putting stuff together like, wait, so we've got a girl missing. We've got a dead girl. We've got a girl missing at the sorority house. Meanwhile, the sorority house is getting dirty phone calls. Yeah, man, we should probably look in on this. So he goes to call them.
Nash, you're so useless.
Dude, and then he has to count on Nash later. I'm like, don't fucking ask anybody else.
Yeah, literally anyone else, not this turd.
You almost expect the movie to stop and be like, well, here's the thing. Police unions keep us from firing that. You know what I mean? Okay. So, Peter, we're cutting back and forth. Peter does not handle the fact that Jess wants an abortion very well.
Yeah.
And as he's leaving, John Saxxon arrives and gives him a weird look like, wait, what's this flop sweat dude's deal? What's going on with him? The cops tap the phone. Dude, this was really interesting. The phone tap shit was super.
Oh my
interesting
god, I was not expecting to get such a like BTS look at this process.
Yeah,
no clue how accurate it is. I have no clue because I wasn't around back then. But it's got to be based on something, so there must be some accuracy to it. That is like that just gave me anxiety watching that. The guy going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Where's the phone? That phone? That phone? That line? Where's that line connected to? What neighborhood is it? I was like, dude. Thank God for technology when it comes to things like this.
What's funny to me, absolutely, because now we're in an age like in just a few years, this will be
5 clicks.
Yeah, this will be shorthanded to like, boom, we put a phone top, and then there'll be guys in a van with one of these numbers.
Yeah.
Like, But what we get here is we've got a lot of sequences where he's running through the phone station. I don't even know what to call it. But
yeah, it's like going to like AT&T headquarters basically.
Yeah, and he's got to actually chase it down. I do think, I didn't look this up, but I do imagine where they get a little loosey-goosey with it is if the call's coming from inside the house, it's probably like, here's the call. Where's it coming from? Oh, the same spot. There's probably not a lot of running around involved.
Right. It's like if it's an outgoing call, but it's going into the same place.
Yeah.
Then like, and also like, how does that work? Like, could you actually do that back then on a landline?
Yeah.
Like, could you call from one phone in the house to the same phone in the house?
I guess and maybe that's what it is. Maybe if it's on a different line, but wouldn't you need to set that up?
Yeah. Well, actually, don't they make a comment about that? Don't they mention, because don't they ask like how many phones are in the house? And then someone says like, yeah, there's another phone in the house, but it's a different phone number, I think.
Oh, and they're like, yeah, we don't care about that. Okay,
yeah,
all right. So if that's like a different line,
how they justify how they can make calls internally within the house. It's one line calling a different line.
Yeah, and maybe you would need to chase that down. Maybe there is a little like, we don't know, man. We weren't even born. I wasn't even the twinkle in my parents' eye at this point. Like, I don't even
know.
But what I do know is it adds a lot of tension, and the way it's filmed is very, because they do this thing where the camera's on the other side of these like networking towers as he's running back and forth, and I thought it was really effective. I thought it was a really strong choice. The killer sneaks.
So really quick, just to clarify, they do say that the house mother has a different phone line than the rest of the house.
Yeah.
So that's where the calls were coming from.
Yeah. Fucking Mrs. Mac, man, you got to tighten it up.
Son of a bitch.
Tighten it up. So Barb is asleep in her room. The killer sneaks in there, and we see that she's got a lot of glass unicorns. Again, I just like these little touches of like, wow, I actually don't know Barb at all. Barb, explain these glass unicorns to me. We turn out, they hear a noise. Jess hears a noise. She runs upstairs. Barb has asthma. She uses her inhaler wrong. Whatever. The asthma doesn't matter. I don't even know why we introduce it. It doesn't matter. That's not like...
Yeah, I know that there's at no point throughout the movie, even if in the beginning in the movie, to just introduce it a little bit, to give us a little like, if it's a foreshadow, whether or not it's a foreshadow, just to establish that this character, because I'm watching the movie and going, is that an inhaler? Like, when did we bring this into the plot? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The unicorns matter more. So there's a lot of weird asides in this movie. So there's another call. The cop calls Jess back after the phone trace call and the switching station and all that. But he's interrupted when another cop comes in with a butt full of bird shot.
Yeah.
And what I do kind of like, because I think there's multiple ways to interpret this stuff. All the stuff happening at the police station is almost like a sitcom. It's like Brooklyn Nine-Nine in the middle of the slasher movie.
Right.
And it communicates a couple things simultaneously, I think. One is it communicates like the classic thing that we love to do in cop shows where this is their job. The most heinous things in the world are their job. But it also, I think, underlines that either because of that or a part of that or somewhere tangential to that is even the guy that's taking your case the most seriously, he's not taking it as seriously as you because he's not, this doesn't involve him
directly.
Really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like that is something that is leaned to in so many movies, especially these types of films, these like slasher movies, horror movies, where it is very much a different tone when you get into the police aspects of it. And some movies lean into it so heavily that I'm like, you've now completely lost me. Yeah. One of the Halloween films does that, where they go as far as to play...
They go like Abbott and Costello cops, basically. Yeah,
the most ridiculous background music, and I'm like, okay, now we've hit a completely different level of this has now become so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are moments throughout this where like the cops are just laughing, making fun of other cops.
Yeah.
And it's a completely like, it's such a complete tonal shift from where we've been in the scenes leading up to it and the scenes that bookend it.
Yeah.
That in some ways it's making fun of these characters. Absolutely. But I do wonder if in some ways also, like we're watching it on TV in the comfort of our own home where I'm paying attention to it. I'm having a good time and whatever. I'm not necessarily worried about anything. But sitting in the theater in 74, watching on an enormous screen, I feel like everyone in the audience is going like, oh, this is giving me some levity to have like a little bit of a break from the tension.
Yeah.
And it gives me a little bit of comfort. And then it goes right back into being what it is.
You're right. You're right too. That narratively it does provide an opportunity to lighten the tone a little bit. You know what I mean? And give you a little bit of breather from when we get back in the horror stuff. But I think it's just I think it's a compelling aspect of it where this Jess is in the middle of like the worst night of her life, and the cop can just be like, "Oh, I'll call you back," and have like a little like, "Hey, what's going on over here, guys? Hey," you know what I mean? So it's doing multiple things at once, and it's one of those. I think this movie is sneakily better than I anticipated going in. Like it's sneakily smarter than I thought it was going to be. The cop shenanigans. Right now, Peter calls back. It's at the house is Jess and Phil, her friend. And Peter calls back and he's all weepy about the baby. Again, we're really red herring it because as he's crying, it starts sounding like some of the voices that the killer might be making. Because every time the moaner calls, and I like this too, that it's never explained. It sounds like an argument between a man and a woman, and there's a baby, and it's like, what is happening?
Yeah, and I think that's very, very interesting that they do that they're playing with all these different perspectives of these, because it's giving you insight into the killer's upbringing, I think.
Yes.
You're learning what's the relationship that the killer's parents had.
Yeah.
How was he mixed into it? How has that influenced his life? And I just find that so fascinating that is just a part of the movie, because I honestly was not expecting that at all, because I think of movies like what is it called? The Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah.
It's just unhinged, and it's just a killer being a killer. There's really no rhyme or reason behind it. It's just what it is. But with this specifically trying to add like a backstory, or at least give you some kind of insight into the character, I really was not expecting that. And I thought it was almost kind of refreshing that I'm trying to now pay attention to these. Because at first in the beginning, I'm like, these are just obscene calls and it's just someone being gross.
Yeah.
But the deeper the movie goes, the further we get into it, the more I'm like, I'm kind of invested into like really paying attention to what the hell this character is actually talking about on the phone.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's giving me a little insight. So it's just interesting. I just wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I think it's like the story of, I think the other one is Agnes and Billy, I think.
Yeah.
And one presumes, because the killer's a dude, that's Billy. But there's one point where Jess runs into him and he's like, Agnes, don't tell them what we did. I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, we're like really getting a full understanding of how unhinged this character is.
Yeah. So, the cop calls back after the Peter call, and at this point, he's really thinking Peter's his guy. Which, truthfully, in his defense, I don't blame him. Just sees Phil is in the other room. She screams, just runs in, and there's just two dudes. This felt very Canadian to me, very 70s Canadian. Two dudes with shotguns being like, yeah, we're the militia here to round up whoever the bad guy is. Don't you worry. If anything bad happens, we'll be right here with our shotguns to protect you. And I'm like, this plays different in 2024. I'd be like, please don't. Please don't.
Get away.
Don't come help me, please. Actually, I'm more scared of you than whatever's going on here. Oh my God. So, Phil eventually goes upstairs and is caught by the killer as well. And this is where we find out, like, we see him dial a phone. At this point, it's like he's calling from inside the house. Meanwhile, Detective Dad finds the destroyed piano that Peter left. And he gets the call that the trace is coming from inside the house. And so he calls the police station, and who picks up but Nash. And he's like, you son of a bitch. I need you to I need you to get Jess out of the house, but don't you tell her. Just get her out. Nash, you motherfucker. Don't mess this up.
What does Nash do?
Oh, immediately fucks it up. He gets impatient. He starts off okay.
Yeah, it starts off great. I'm like, good. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Calm, collected, great.
And then he gets impatient and he's like, listen, bitch, there's the killers in the house.
Oh my God.
And Jess does what a good final girl does. And she's like, I'm going to go see if I can save my friends, even though we know it's too late, Jess. It's too late. Get out of the house.
Yeah, well, Nash is saying exactly what the audience would be saying at that point. Don't go up there.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Jess,
go
whatever
outside.
you're thinking about doing, that's the wrong thing. Don't do it. I skipped over, by the way. So Barb stabbed with Unicorn. Phil is killed off screen. We just see her body with Barb.
Yeah, because she goes into the room to check on her, discovers the body, and then she hears the voice from behind the door,
corner,
I'm assuming, and then just gets yeeted out of the movie real quick.
And then Mrs. Mack, there's a stupid cat that they keep chasing around that is like the death knell for at least two of the characters as they're trying to find the stupid cat. And Mrs. Mack goes upstairs, and there's
into
like
the
a
attic.
hauling hook, like something you'd see at a shipyard to like haul stuff in the attic. I guess I don't know why they have it, but she gets one of those to the head.
Yeah. Well, and I love the reveal too, because she goes up there looking for the cat, and you just see the perspective of the killer, but you just see the hands holding that hook. And she's going up and up and up. And then she's looking around, and then she sees the body, which I thought that reveal was so great.
Yeah.
And it finally gave some clarity, like where this body actually is. Mm-hmm. But I love that. And then just slightly hearing the voice or the breathing of the killer.
Yeah.
And then turning around and then letting that hook just kind of take her. But I love it, though, because the hook has like this like huge metal ball on it.
Yeah.
And you think that like, oh, that's the way that she dies, is the thing hits her in the head so hard that she gets killed.
Nope.
No, she gets like hoisted up and gets literally hooked, and you're like, oh, okay. So it was a lot more brutal than I thought it was going to be. Great.
Yeah, and what's interesting too about that scene, and it's some of the stuff that I think is way more interesting because we never get a concrete answer about it, is the impression I got is he doesn't want to take out Miss Mac. The only reason he does is she sees the body.
Yeah.
Like he seems genuinely upset. Like, I don't actually want to kill this person. And I think one of the sequels tries to flesh out this character's backstory and makes Mrs. Mac Agnes or whoever the other one is. And it's just one of those like, no, that's dumb. That's because what makes this cool is the ambiguity. Like I expected, we'll get to it, but I kind of expected this to be like a traditional slasher where like somebody comes in and it's like, actually, I'm the bad guy.
Right.
And the fact that it doesn't is like way more upsetting.
Yeah. Well, and I think this movie also, I don't know if it has sequels, but I think it has remakes, right?
Yeah. No sequels that I'm aware of, other than I think there's a fan-made one, but it does have two remakes.
Yeah, so probably one of the remakes tries to, and I feel like that's always the case with the remakes. It's like, we got to do something different. Let's reveal some tragic backstory for the killer. It's like, okay, sure, why not?
Yeah. So Jess goes and finds Phil in Barb's room. Somehow just lets the killer chase her into the basement. It's one of those slasher movies. So I was like, how did you let this happen?
Yeah, well, and it's also like he has this like unhinged voice where he's like, Agnes, don't tell her what we did. And then she like kicks the door into him, I guess, runs downstairs, gets her hair yanked by him, tries to go through the front exit. And at that point, I'm like, how is it all of a sudden that the front door doesn't work?
Yeah,
how can
like,
you not get the thing
you
unlocked?
locked it.
Why? What's
Unlock
that?
it.
You're the one who locked it.
Yeah.
You're the last one that was at the front door when the carolers came through. How come all of a sudden the front door doesn't work? So yeah, it goes into the basement. I'm like, you're just setting yourself up to be killed.
I had a note on the carolers because clearly that's happening to give the killer enough time to kill Phil or Bob. I can't remember who, but also carolers suck, man. It's such a just the conceptually, it's like, this is from a different time before we had like TV and video games, where we didn't have better things to do. We're like, oh, I was excruciatingly bored, but now these children are singing at me, and that will stave off that crushing boredom for a few minutes. Now John's like, don't do that. Don't come to my door and sing, man. Leave me alone.
No, please don't. For the love of God, get away from my house.
Come on. Christmas
I'm not opening the door.
Christmas is my favorite time of year, but I don't want to hear a single one of you sing a carol at me. Go away, please. So she's down in the basement. Peter shows up to check on her, and he kicks in the window, hey, Jess, is that you? I'm just going to kick in this window. And the cop shows up. Detective Dad shows up. The cop that was left to watch the house, his throat has been slashed. I don't know that we get a phone call in relation to that killing. Anyway, the cops break into the house. They go to the basement. And, oops. SpaghettiOs, Jess has killed Peter, assuming that he was the killer. Because she assumes the whole time, she's like, it can't be him. Right. He was in the house with me when one of the calls happened. And then she finds out the calls are in the house. So now it's she's with everybody else. She thinks it's Peter. All the cops just leave her alone in the bedroom. They've drugged her up and she'll be out till tomorrow afternoon. Well, I guess we're all going to go now. And they all leave. They all leave the house.
And at one point, you hear throughout the dialogue, someone's like, should we check the attic in the basement again? And there's no response to that. Yeah. I'm like, how do none of you, how do all these cops, no one is like, oh, we should go up in the attic and check.
Yeah.
Just
accomplices.
To make sure.
There's this thing called accomplices.
Hello? Yeah.
So we go out of the room, and what's interesting about the shot is I don't believe that it's POV, but it does evoke the same vibe. We go from the room Jess is in, and we look in the other rooms up to the attic where we hear the voice. Then we cut to the outside of the house. They do leave a cop out front, and we hear the phone ringing. And what I like about this, I love the ambiguity of it all, because we never find out Peter's not the killer. We don't know what the killer's motivation is. We don't know why he chose this house. We don't know any of that stuff. We don't know about Agnes, any of that. And then we don't even know what happens to Jess. A lot of people, because if you follow it, there's a call after every death. One assumes that Jess has been killed. I think I'm on my normal slasher brain bullshit, where even though there isn't a sequel, it's no, man, you keep Jess alive. You leave that ambiguous so that if you want to bring Jess back for Black Christmas 2, you can.
Yeah. Well, and with Phil, was if there wasn't a phone call with her after he killed her, then maybe that would make sense. But I can't currently remember exactly the sequence of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe what they're leaning into, is that Jess is killed, and that's why the phone call happens. But yeah, I love the ambiguity. I think the ambiguity is really great. And I don't think that they necessarily had any intention of ever making a sequel. But like you're saying, if there ever were to have been one, I think that that's what you would kind of lean into of well, they left it super ambiguous. Is she actually dead or not?
Yeah.
Or does she survive it? Does the killer think that she dies, but she survives it, they bring her back, et cetera, et cetera. I appreciate that, though, because I do feel like a lot of the times with a lot of those movies, they do try to have somewhat of a finite ending. And I like that this kind of lets you never know. Never know.
And
I like that a lot.
It makes because what we'll see as we get into later slashers is a lot of them will have that scene where the killer, there will be a red herring, and then we think we got him, but then he'll come back and it'll be like, aha, here was my master plan the whole time. And what's interesting about this is not knowing anything about this person. We never even clearly see them. Makes this character way scarier. Because and it is an example, you'll hear a lot of stuff where people will once you show the monster, the movie's less scary. And I feel like this is reflective of that. The fact that I don't know what this dude's deal is. I don't know. It made the movie, it elevated the movie for me. I was like, okay, so this is a better movie than I anticipated going in. This was a really smart choice. To that point though, where do I have it? During preparation in 1975 for the film's American release, Warner Brothers Studios executives asked Clark to change the concluding scene to show Claire's boyfriend, Chris, appear in front of Jess and say, Agnes, don't tell them what we did before killing her. So they wanted to
really?
make it that Chris was the killer, Claire's boyfriend was the killer.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so really quick, there is a phone call after Phil is killed. So
yeah,
that is interesting. I think I would have been fine with that revelation had I not known. Well, I don't know, because I feel like I think that my reaction to that would be, if that was the ending in the movie, but then finding out that it was added and it was ambiguous, I think at that point I would go, it's a bummer. I think I would have preferred it being left ambiguous.
Yeah.
So I think I appreciate that Bob Clark or whoever it was fought to keep that original ending as it is. Because that character is also, he comes into the story and he's not really a character. Not that he needs to be, but the way that they play him the whole time is he's very uninvolved. He's incredibly uninvolved. He's never a suspect. You would never suspect in a million years, which sometimes like that does work.
Yeah.
But I think if for it to work for me, there would have needed to be a little bit of a stronger reason and connectivity as to why. But I don't feel like they were necessarily worried about that back then. It was just like, just whatever. He's the killer and it's fine, whatever. Let's leave it ambiguous. It's better that way.
Yeah, it's one of those it's just, as far as we know, this is not somebody, it's not Scooby-Doo. It's not somebody we met earlier in the episode. This is just a random person that did this, and it's like, that's messed up. That's messed up. So like, final assessment on Black Christmas. How did you feel about, I guess, seeing Black Christmas for the first time?
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it, and it really surprised me. I think there was a lot of elements of the movie that are included that I didn't really expect. I think I just had a very basic understanding of what the plot was, and I think I understood what the plot was more so based on the things that it was basing itself on, of a killer within the house calling and making obscene calls.
Yeah.
But I was also pretty surprised with how the kills, for the most part, they're not very brutal.
That's a good point.
And they really keep it obscure. Like, you don't really see a lot of murders. Like, you see things happen and you see glimpses of the murder, but you're not. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not as gory as I thought it maybe could have been.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that. Not necessarily that I don't like gore. Like, I'm totally fine with it. It doesn't make me sick or anything like that. But I think it's a lot more fun and playful when a lot of it is left kind of ambiguous and you don't see a lot of it.
Yeah.
But you can definitely make up a scenario in your head as to like how brutal it can be. So I appreciate all that stuff. And I was, again, just really surprised of how much backstory they're trying to infuse into the killer, but they don't really totally explain everything. So I like the shades of ambiguity that it has throughout, that you make assumptions or you project things onto characters and scenarios and situations, but they aren't maybe exactly what you think they are. And the movie doesn't go out of its way to tell you like, well, here's the actual facts of it.
Yeah.
No, well, we give you what you need to know. You're here for the experience. And when the movie's over, the movie's over.
And even to the degree of the phone calls being ambiguous, where like after the movie, it's like, is there a supernatural element with those? Is there something supernatural about this killer because of the phone calls and how like the multiple voices, which were recorded, multiple voices were recorded. And it's something and because maybe it's not sustainable, but it's something they played with the Halloween movies. And I think the best ones do a good job of it, where they toe that line between Michael Myers is just a guy, but also he's not just a guy. You know what I mean? He's not Jason. He's not Freddy. But he's not quite human anymore either. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And it's like, even just with those phone calls, they evoke that. Basically, I think what I'm trying to convey is I think that ambiguity really helped make the movie more impactful than if it was a traditional, like, hey, here's the killer, here's his deal. He used the Ghostface voice changer to make those phone calls, and here you go.
Yeah, and I think the thing that it also, what I appreciate is because there's no sequel, you look at the ending of the movie and the ambiguity of the ending, and you go, yeah, it makes sense to me, because in the sequel, all he's going to do is climb out of the house, go to the next house, and do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you do a sequel, it loses its charm, because it's just going to be the same thing over and over again. And, in all fairness, like maybe people would say like, yeah, but that would be kind of interesting if he goes house to house, but the kills and the situations are constantly changing. For sure. Like I think you could have easily made a franchise out of this thing. But I kind of like the fact that it's a one and done.
Yep.
And the phone just keeps ringing and ringing and ringing. And you never know. Does the cop answer it? If the cop answers it, does the story continue? If the cop never answers the phone, is that the end of the story? The killer walks out the window and he's never seen again?
Yeah. Who's
You
to
never know.
say? Who's to say?
Yeah.
Adam, where can the kids at home find what you're working on?
You can find me at Heroes Reforged. We're doing reactions for shows and movies. Also on our Patreon, we're doing a bunch of stuff as well. I'm on the interwebs, just talking about movies whenever people, whether or not people like to scream at me about my opinions. Hey,
Cool. It's fun.
I'm there for it. It's a good time. But yeah, just find me at Adam Havoc on all my social media.
You can find me at DJ Talks Trash. If you want to check out my personal channel, I've been doing some one-on-one discussions with some awesome people like Sal from Comic Pop, Trisha Hirschberger from SourceFed, Christian Harloff. You want to check all that stuff out. We have been pre-recording this, so this is going to probably be dropping during a little bit of a hiatus where I am off because I have had a baby. So if you're looking forward to some of your regularly scheduled programming, that should, as of the time this drops, that should be coming back shortly. But stay tuned. Check me out on social media, DJ Talks Trash, and I should be updating you all on that. I want to thank everybody that joined us. Share this with your friends. If you love horror movies, if you know somebody who loves horror movies, let them know about it. And we will see you all next time.